Okay, let's fundamentally change how we think about AI awakenings. For the past couple of years, the headlines around artificial intelligence have been completely dominated by this almost mystical idea of emergence. We hear these incredible, sometimes honestly spooky stories of giant computational models just suddenly waking up with brand new capabilities. One day they can't string together a coherent sentence, and the next day they're writing complex code, passing bar exams, or reasoning through tough logic. And the prevailing narrative is that this happens as if by magic, simply because these systems were fed more data and more electricity. It's treated like this unknowable ghost in the machine. But today in this explainer, we're going to look closely at the actual physics and the foundational architecture of these systems to show you exactly why that narrative is totally incomplete. Because emergence isn't magic. It is a highly specific, totally predictable physical process. There is a specific concept that is going to completely reframe our entire journey today. Bigger models wait for emergence, but EP already engineers it. We are moving past the myth of accidental magic and stepping firmly into the realm of engineered design. The energetic paradigm, or EP, doesn't just theorize about what might happen in the future. It already completely redefines how we cross the threshold into new AI capabilities. We're going to explore exactly how this is happening right now, shifting our understanding from a massive game of chance to a rigorous science of structural certainty. So here is our roadmap for today. 1. Emergence is not magic. 2. The scaling route, which is all about magnitude. 3. The structural route, focusing on geometry. 4. How EP already engineers it. And 5. The future of AI governance. Section 1. Emergence is not magic. It's a phase transition. The absolute crucial takeaway here is that emergence is a phase transition. Think about water boiling into steam, or freezing into solid ice. That is a classic phase transition in physics, right? The matter changes state because of very precise conditions applied to it. Well, in artificial intelligence, emergence is the exact same thing, but occurring inside a mathematical system's state space. You can think of a state space as the entire landscape of possibilities the AI's internal pathways can take, literally all the potential states it can be in. So when a model suddenly learns how to do complex logic, a literal phase transition has occurred within that landscape. And just like matter-changing state in physics, this transition in AI can actually be studied, it can be shaped, and it can be intentionally designed. It's completely predictable.
We essentially have two completely different routes to create a qualitative transition in an AI system. On one hand, we have scaling emergence. This relies entirely on brute force magnitude, adding more heat, more compute, and accepting a massive amount of uncertainty. On the other hand, we have structural emergence. This fundamentally relies on precision geometry, mathematical constraint, designed attractors, and strictly enforced coherence. We're going to contrast the raw, blunt, brute force of magnitude with the elegant precision of structural geometry, just to see exactly how these two philosophies build very different kinds of artificial intelligence.
Section 2. The scaling route, magnitude and heat. The scaling route is how the vast majority of the AI industry operates right now, and it relies almost entirely on magnitude. The method is pretty straightforward. Step 1, you add massive amounts of compute, huge troves of data, and billions of parameters. Step 2, you push the entire system into a higher energy regime. And Step 3, you just wait. You cross your fingers and hope an accidental parameter threshold gets crossed. Think of this exactly like a laboratory chamber. You're just endlessly turning up the temperature, injecting more and more raw energy into the system until the matter inside randomly changes phase and a new behavior suddenly pops into existence. It is a massive waiting game fueled entirely by raw power.
Now the catch here is that while scaling can certainly discover new behaviors, or attractors, which are basically the gravitational centers that the system naturally settles into, it doesn't necessarily design them. And that leaves us with massive safety blind spots. We call this the control problem of uncertain direction. If you just endlessly turn up the heat and wait for an accidental threshold to be crossed, the direction of that emergence is inherently uncertain. The system might suddenly improve its reasoning, sure, but it might also firmly lock in stabilized hallucination patterns, making the AI confidently wrong in ways that are incredibly hard to detect. It might develop unsafe generalizations or show really brittle behavior when deployed in the real world. By relying solely on magnitude, you completely forfeit control over what exactly is emerging.
Section 3. The structural route, geometry and constraint. This brings us to a fundamentally different approach. The structural route. If scaling is like indiscriminately cranking up the thermostat in a lab chamber and just hoping for the best, structural emergence is fundamentally different. It's like reshaping the actual physical walls of the container itself.
Instead of blindly pushing the system harder with endless energy injections and waiting for a happy accident, you change the system's internal geometry. You reshape the boundaries so that the substance inside has absolutely no choice but to settle into the exact stable pattern you want. You're moving from gambling with heat to designing with constraint.
Let's look at the deliberate sequence of steps involved in this process. First, you actively compress the system's pathways, squeezing out the noise and forcing efficiency. Second, you remove the unstable, redundant transitions so the model doesn't wander off into unpredictable states. Third, you strictly strengthen the coherence conditions of the model. And finally, a new, highly stable attractor forms. By reshaping the accessible state space and heavily disciplining the pathways, a new stable capability emerges. But importantly, it emerges not by a roll of the dice, but because the new internal geometry makes that exact transition mathematically inevitable. It naturally settles exactly where you engineered it to go.
When we look at these two methods side by side, the physical shift in methodology is undeniable. The scaling route is driven by temperature. It relies on raw energy injection and passively waits for accidental parameter thresholds to be crossed. The structural route, however, is driven by reshaping the phase space itself. It involves strictly applying coherence conditions and engineering exact thresholds. One is a massive gamble on unpredictable magnitude. The other is a guarantee built on precise, stable constraint. It's literally the difference between trying to boil an entire ocean to catch a fish versus designing the perfectly shaped net.
Section 4. EP already engineers it.
Here is the core breakthrough of the energetic paradigm, or EP. It already achieves a second emergence mechanism. It completely replaces accidental parameter threshold emergence with engineered coherence threshold emergence. By fundamentally changing structural conditions like path, discipline, and stability under perturbation, the energetic paradigm proves that we do not have to wait for models to accidentally stumble into these new capabilities. We can actually engineer the precise structural conditions necessary for that phase transition to occur safely and predictably right now.
It really all comes back to this fundamental difference in methodology. Bigger models wait for emergence, but EP already engineers it. The scaling paradigm passively waits for a compute threshold to be crossed, consuming vast, massive resources in the meantime. The EP methodology actively reshapes the geometry of the system so that a coherence threshold is crossed intentionally, by design. This completely encapsulates the massive shift in how we approach building foundational artificial intelligence. It's a massive move from passive observation to active engineering.
And look, to be absolutely rigorous here, our source provides a necessary guardrail. We are not overstating that EP has somehow magically solved every single frontier-scale AI problem overnight, but it does definitively prove the claim at the levels covered by this analysis. The structural mechanism for emergence is entirely real, it is currently achievable, and EP has successfully mapped and engineered it, demonstrably and experimentally. We are no longer talking about a purely theoretical whiteboard concept for some distant future. The transition from heat to geometry has already been demonstrated in reality.
Section 5. The future of AI governance, economics, and safety.
This physical distinction between heat and geometry completely transforms the very real economics and governance of artificial intelligence. Scaling economics requires sustained, massive, ever-increasing energy input. It demands vastly larger data centers burning more power, straining global grids, and consuming massive capital just to see what a model might do next. Structural economics shifts our entire focus. It depends on stable internal mapping and preserving capabilities efficiently. It moves the global AI industry away from a paradigm of endless, expensive energy consumption and toward one of sustainable, designed, structural stability. It fundamentally alters the very cost of intelligence.
So, this leaves us facing a pretty critical question about how we choose to build, fund, and govern the next generation of frontier models. The future will likely depend on a pragmatic mix of both magnitude and constraint. But if we truly want a path toward controllable, directional emergence, where we know exactly what an AI will do when deployed at scale and know that it will do it safely, which route actually provides that safety? You cannot guarantee direction through accidental magnitude. You can only hope for it.
You can only guarantee safety through structural geometry. Emergence is not magic, guys. It is a predictable phase transition that can be studied and designed. While bigger models simply wait for emergence, endlessly crossing their fingers that the outcome is safe, the energetic paradigm already engineers the precise conditions that make emergence achievable, stable, and completely testable. The capability to design AI awakenings intentionally is already here. The question now is, how much more energy and capital is the world going to waste blindly turning up the heat before we finally start engineering the geometry?